Hey everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at the Saturday race of the day. It is the Grade 3 Holy Bull Stakes at Gulfstream Park as Derby preps start to really get pretty serious with the calendar turning to February. We've got three preps taking place across the country, offering 20 points to the winner on Saturday. And that future race at Gulfstream Park, the Holy Bull carded at the mile and a 16th distance for the 3-year-olds. Do note, this being the Saturday race of the day, you can get free all-access PPs for this race. Formulator, Timeform US PPs, handicap along with us on that race of the day page on DRF.com. Mike, we've got a field of 7 here. Not the biggest field in the world for the Holy Bull, but there's something interesting about every one of the horses in this field. A lot of potential among these 7 runners. The race does go through the number 2, Ferocious, though. He showed a lot of talent during his 2-year-old season, and we'll see if he can overcome some of those disappointing results towards the latter half of his juvenile campaign.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's the most interesting horse in the race. Ultimately, maybe he's just the most talented horse in the race, and we'll see if he, finally gets the right kind of a trip here, David, to get himself some Derby points. You mentioned we got 3 preps. Unless you just love Bob Baffert, this is by far the most interesting of the 3 prep races.
100%. I mean, Ferocious probably is going to go favorite in here, but there are plenty of horses that have shown talent on the way in and look like they still have upside coming into this Holy Bull. To get a sense of how these horses might sort themselves out heading into that clubhouse turn, let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this race, Mike. And when I handicap this affair, I don't see that much speed in here. I mean, I guess the number 3 Tapen Street could get an aggressive ride coming out of a sprint race. He did show good tactical speed going the 7 furlong distance, but he's stretching out around 2 turns for the first time, so we'll see how aggressive they are with him. Guns Loaded also stretching out, but he has shown a ton of early speed in some of his early sprint races, so it does feel like he's quick enough to make the lead, and we'll see if anybody wants to push him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to me, the 4 was the speed of the race, and I gotta believe they're going to come out of there looking for the lead again this time. And personally, David, I just feel like the whole key to the pace is Ferocious, who's probably going to be the favorite in here. And I just wonder if he's ever going to get a more aggressive ride. And I understand that there have been some excuses in the early stages of some of his races that maybe prevented him from being forward. But he seems to be like a horse who has natural speed, and so far they just haven't really used it.
Ferocious is adding blinkers for this Holy Bull, so maybe that's a clue as to what the tactics will be on Saturday. Let's go through this field in program number order, beginning with the number 1, Kinetic Control, a horse that took 4 starts to break his maiden, finally did so going this distance at Churchill Downs last time. And Mike, I thought he got a pretty soft trip that day, got right to the front end, was able to set some moderate fractions, held on at the end. A horse who did earn his career best buyer in start number 2 when he got a 78, but the winner of that race has been pretty disappointing since then. I kind of wonder about the validity of that number, and just feels like he would have to get faster to beat this crew.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does in here, Dave, because you're 100% right when you go back and look at the maiden win last time. They basically just handed the race to him and let him go really slow on the lead, and he won. Personally, I'm not betting him, and I don't like him off of that race. I actually felt like he was a little interesting prior to that, though. I thought his debut was a pretty good performance, even though he came away second best. He ran okay. You're right that race too, in his second career start hasn't necessarily panned out. It's another race where I thought he ran pretty well. He's very green early in both of those races. So I did think there were some interesting things about him. I just would never bet him off of that last one where they just handed the race to him.
The key to this race is the number 2 Ferocious, as Mike was indicating earlier. A horse who was so impressive on debut at Saratoga. That was over a muddy sealed track, and that's his only victory to date. But it's not like he ran poorly in his subsequent 3 Grade 1 tries, finishing second in the Hopeful and the Breeders' Futurity. We'll take a look at that race, the Breeders' Futurity 2-back for Ferocious in his past performances. Second best to East Avenue on this day. He did have trouble into the clubhouse turn and then just could never catch East Avenue over a track that was pretty kind to speed horses at Keeneland this day back in October. Came back in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last time, Mike, and just could never really get into position. I mean, he's not the quickest horse away from the gate, but they also weren't that aggressive, as you noted, and just got shuffled back at a couple points, really shuffled back around the far turn, but was running on at the end. He is this horse with a massive stride to him. I mean, he just has one of the longest strides that you'll see among any of these 3-year-olds on the Derby Trail. And for these horses, when they have to race in traffic, I find that it's sometimes hard for them to get into a rhythm. And I've noticed that about Ferocious in both of his 2-turn races. So kind of wonder what's going to be different here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. That's one of the reasons where I just feel like they got to get more aggressive with this horse and just let him come out of there running and just listen, try to make the lead. If you get cleared by a fast horse like Guns Loaded, that's fine. You can clear, maybe get to the outside and keep after that horse. But, if nothing else, David, you noted all the trouble he had in the Breeders' Cup last time. I mean, he had most of that trouble because it was one of the stupidest rides you'll ever see. I mean, this horse got away from the gate good. He was forward in there. They weren't. East Avenue misses the break. That's your chance to sort of seize the advantage, and they just didn't take it. And this horse just was wound up in no man's land. I don't know, man. I just think he looks good on paper anyway. I think he might be even better than that.
The number 3 is Tapen Street, who was one of the more intriguing runners coming into this Holy Bull off a debut victory for trainer Brad Cox, where he took a ton of money, was bet down to 2-1 in a 12-horse field, and delivered. We'll take a look at the replay of that race. Now, Mike, he actually was losing some ground around the far turn here. It looked for a brief moment like he might be off the board because he was getting asked by Luis Saez, wasn't really traveling. You could see hanging on his left lead, an upper stretch, but once he sort of gets clued in and switches over to his right lead, he really finishes off this race powerfully, looking very much like a horse that is going to appreciate stretching out the 2 turns here. He's got plenty of stamina breeding on the bottom side to suggest that added ground is going to be his friend. He appears to be training well coming in here. I watched his workout 2 back, which was in company with Patch Adams, and to my eye, this horse outworked Patch Adams. So I do feel like he's doing well into this race. I did find this DRF formulator fact for Brad Cox, though. I always take note of poor stats for Brad Cox because it's so easy to find good stats for the Cox barn. And this one's a little surprising to me. Second start of a career in graded stakes dirt routes, just 1 for 15, plenty of short prices in the sample, and he's only won once.
Yeah, this is a good stat to put up there too, Dave, because this horse does feel like he's probably going to take a little money in this race. And you really do have to think long and hard about taking shorter prices on horses like this when they're facing good fields, and this is a good field. So I don't know how short I'd be willing to go on this horse. I liked everything about his debut. He didn't look like a sprinter at all, and just sort of won that race on talent alone. Like you, I thought he finished it off really well. There's tons of distance in his pedigree to suggest he's just going to get better as the distances get longer. I don't want to bet him in here because I don't think he's going to be a great price, but I think he can win.
The number 4 is Guns Loaded. That horse that we mentioned could be in an advantageous position based on that Timeform US pace projector because there's not a ton of speed signed on here, and he does have that gate speed to get ahead of these horses heading into that clubhouse turn, which comes up very quickly. We'll take a look at his most recent start when he was a winner of the Mucho Macho Man. And Mike, we handicapped this race together. I think we both thought he was going to be really tough to beat in this day, and he was a little underwhelming in victory. He gets the job done as the 6-5 favorite, but when he opened up on that field coming to the quarter pole, it looked like he was going to win by whatever margin they wanted to, and he's getting pretty tired in the late stages here. Maybe there was a little bit of him looking around, losing some focus at the very end, but that horse Treaty of Rome almost got to him coming to the finish line. I did notice on the gallop out, Treaty of Rome never went by. This horse kind of realized that he had company and stayed on through the finish. So I don't think that's necessarily evidence that he doesn't want to go farther. You might wonder how good he is because that race only got a 79 buyer, but I don't want to get too down on him because I did think he had real ability coming into that race.
Yeah, I saw the same thing you did on the gallop, but I was wondering what you thought of that performance, David, because we didn't talk about it afterwards. So I'm glad that you laid it out there. I felt the same way about it. I was just sort of underwhelmed by the victory, but he did what he had to do. I do think he's going to make the lead here, and this distance, around 2 turns at Gulfstream, if you can make the lead, I think it's a pretty big advantage. I think he's better than that last race. He's another one. I'll wait and see what kind of price he's going to be. IRAD jumps on now. I feel like this horse is going to be a really short price once again. If nothing else, this race is tougher than the last one.
Yeah, I wonder if that switch to IRAD is going to be viewed as a positive because Luis Saez is his main rider and apparently chose Tapen Street for this race. So maybe that's going to attract some more support in the other direction. I'll just note, it's tough to make speed figures at Gulfstream because they run so few dirt races. The 79 buyer, when you look at the entire field, feels a little low. So we'll see how that plays out moving forward. The number 5 is Hes Not Joking, and horse that I think you just wanted to see a little bit more from when he got on the dirt for the first time in the Kentucky Jockey Club. Was towards the inside for much of his trip, and that wasn't really a race that favored horses trying to make runs from off the pace, but he just never picked up. He was pretty impressive 2 back when he won the Gray Stakes over the synthetic at Woodbine. Just not sure even that performance makes him good enough.
I'm not sure it does either. I actually liked all of his races on the other surface up at Woodbine. Even the race 3 back on the display, he just had a terrible trip in that race and actually ran. I feel like if you're looking for a horse to just take a shot with at a big price in this race, he is probably the one because I'm with you that he didn't run well in the Kentucky Jockey Cup, but first, you break from the rail in your dirt debut, you got to get out of the gate. He didn't do that. He wanted to blast. He was just, Giroux just could not get this horse to settle up the Betchers. He dragged him up in behind horses, finally wound up getting tired in there. But to me, nothing worked out in his dirt debut. So if you told me, you know what, he's talented, he's got some dirt in his pedigree, give him a pass for that last one and see if he can do better this time, I would not argue with you because I think this horse is talented.
The number 6 is Burning Glory, who has plenty of pedigree behind him. That's never a surprise for these Juddmonte homebreds being by into Mischief, the dam half-sister to the Close Hatches, a multimillionaire. This is a horse who's been coming along nicely through the 3 starts of his career, made a big middle move around the turn, 2 back when he just lost going the mile and the 16th distance, flattened out a little bit at the end of that race. Then last time, once again, big impressive move around the turn, traveled really well into the race and looked like he was going to win for fun. Ended up having to work pretty hard for that victory in the late stages and just barely got by a horse who I do have to point out came back in his next start and only got a 56 buyer, losing as the 1-2 favorite. So I wonder how strong that race was, but visually it does feel like maybe this horse has more improvement in it.
Yeah, I noticed that about the horse that he ran down. That horse was making his dirt debut in the Churchill race and went off at a big price and, had a big lead in the stretch. And this horse, I wound up getting by him in his most recent start. He did have a little trouble, but he lost at the short price last time with no figure. He did have a little trouble in that race. So we'll see. I guess the jury's still out about what this horse beat last time. I guess if you want to call it the intangibles, that's fine. I just like those things about this horse because as you pointed out, David, he's got pedigree. It feels like Mott has been bringing him along race by race. I think he ran really well first time out, despite being green. I thought he ran even better second time out. He didn't change his lead in the stretch last time. And I wonder, dropping back from a 2-turn route back to a 1-turn route last time, I'm not sure that really helped this horse all that much. I think getting back out around 2 turns with more distance will actually help him. And I feel like he's shown enough to suggest that he could be a stakes horse down the line. I hate taking a horse from off the pace at Gulfstream Park. I think this horse might be better than he looks on paper, though.
We close out discussion of the contenders with another intriguing runner drawn on the outside, the number 7 Burnham Square, a horse that they risked for $150,000 claiming tag on debut. I guess you can do that when you're debuting a gelding. Nobody's going to claim a horse like that for $150,000, and did run on well at a big price that day to get up for second. Came back at his next start, really improved with the added distance, his buyer all the way up to an 83, and then a subsequent step forward when they tried the distance again last time at Gulfstream Park. We'll take a look at the replay of that race. He was way more aggressive in the early stages, didn't break on top, was actually rating in third early and kind of made a big move under his own power as his jockey Edgar Zayas allowed him to move through inside, took that race over on the backstretch. And once he was asked to go, you could see he is just widening from this field as much the best. Loved the way he was maintaining his strides all the way through the wire. So it feels like distance is no problem for this horse. I like the progression from start to start. It just feels like in this race, he's probably going to need a little bit more of a setup.
Yeah, like all 3 of his races, the big difference now, and listen, it should not go, it can't be underestimated, David. Mile and a 16th on this track, breaking from the rail is one thing, breaking from the far outside post is another thing. I know this isn't a huge field, but he's going to get a different trip this time. He's not making the lead and the rail around the first turn this time. So we'll see how he handles it. I like all of his races, and he's another horse, so I think is going to be a fair price in here, and I want to use him.
Let's throw up our picks for this grade 3 Holy Bull. And Mike, I'll say when I went to handicap this race, I thought I was going to hate the horse that I picked on top, Guns Loaded, because I was left really underwhelmed by the Mucho Macho Man and kind of expected this would be a tough spot for him. But taking into consideration the pace scenario, looking back at that entire race in the field, I feel like my first impression was maybe the wrong one, and this horse might have another step forward in him, stretching out in distance. I still believe the distance could be okay for him, especially if he gets loose up front and is able to back down this pace a little bit. I think it could be tough.
I'm not going to argue with any of that. I don't have him in there, David, because I did go with my first impression of the Mucho Macho Man. And
I get it.
Considering the fact that he's not going to be a great price here, I'm okay with that. If he beats me, that's fine. We'll see what happens. I still feel like Ferocious. I don't want to give up on him yet, David. I'm going to call him the horse to beat in here, although, that could be debated. I'm not going to get away from him just yet, but I want to bet somebody else. If I'm going to bet the race, I want to bet somebody else. And I think Burning Glory is one of those horses who actually has a chance to be pretty good. He'll be a price this time.
6271 for Mike, 4732 for me. And the Saturday race of the day, it is the grade 3 Holy Bull on Saturday at Gulfstream. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.